Good morning, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to this week's Weekly Wednesday webinar at TAG. My name is Leilani Evans. I will be your moderator for today's session. So if you're new to Zoom, feel free to take a look at the toolbar down at the bottom of your panel. You'll be able to send in any questions along the way through the Q&A box as well as the chat box. I will be monitoring those as our presenter continues on with our demo and discussion. So with that, I would love to introduce our presenter for today, James Coyle. Our topic for today is Sage Liberty Reports, and we are here again to support all of your processes, reporting, all of your tools with your Sage 100 Contractor and Sage 300 CRE accounting software. So if you have questions, again, just feel free to send those in through the chat box, or we will also put in our email address. Happy to set up a meeting to discuss this a little bit further in detail. So without further ado, I will hand it over to James, who's been working with this technology for many, many years, super advanced and great feedback that we've been getting from our clients with this tool. So with that, James, go ahead.
Thank you, Leilani, and thanks everyone for joining. Can you confirm you hear me, Leilani? I came off of mute.
Yes, yes.
Okay, very good. All right, well, thanks everyone for joining, and again, thanks so much to TAG for hosting this opportunity to show this exciting technology. We just have a couple of slides that we're going to go into before we just delve and spend the majority of the time in the technology. And the slides are really centered around, making sure you understand kind of what we're going to show and what this technology is as compared to what alternate technology is available, much of which, if you already are using Sage 100 Contractor, you know, and if you're not using it, you'll become more aware through this process. So really, we're talking about a tool in your arsenal that you could choose to utilize, and many of your peers have utilized this, a lot of your peers. So these are the things we're going to cover. I actually will probably create a variety of different solutions beyond just like an AP invoice inquiry. I'll create more than that when I'm working with the data. So what is Liberty Reports? I guess that's where we start. So it's technology. It's compatible with Sage 100 Contractor, the databases that Sage supports. So if people still have legacy version 19 data, it can read that, this technology, and of course, Microsoft SQL Server database in Sage 100 Contractor. It's embedded in Excel, yet it's Sage 100 Contractor centric. So from within Excel, one of the things you can do is you can design and run your own reports or add to ones that were already designed. Optionally, you could simply just utilize reports that are there or that you have created for you, or it could be a combination. And we want you to have an overview so you can visualize why you might want to utilize the designer yourself or what your report strategy might be. But ultimately, when we look at why people choose this sort of technology over maybe other options, is because of how intuitive it will be to somebody who understands Excel. Essentially, it takes what you know about Excel and it eliminates the obstacles to getting access to and laying out and presenting Sage 100 Contractor-centric data and other information you would just normally add into Excel, like information you type in or whatever. And because of that, you can do a lot more with a report. It can drive work processes and allow for collaboration in a way that a paper report or something that's just printed to a screen wouldn't be able to do. And I've been affiliated with this technology for over 35 years, and so I'm very familiar with what was available back 35 years ago. And I noticed that a lot of people are still using technology as pretty much what we offered back then. And this would be using a tool that lots of people have, but in a way that's pretty extraordinary. So hopefully that we get those points across to you today. So Excel-based capabilities that sometimes people don't leverage, you will leverage it or can leverage it with this sort of technology. So pivot tables and charts and graphs, once they're connected to the data that you've connected to Sage 100 Contractor, they all refresh. So you get really very functional and visually appealing presentation of information, and it's not difficult for you to understand how that's created or for people to utilize it. So the result there is not only the high quality reporting, but an improvement over how stakeholders relate to information in a timely basis. So we're going to remove obstacles that you might otherwise have with legacy reporting, that where data might be in a variety of different locations, different tables or different databases. We're going to remove those obstacles, and that's what our objective is, to help you understand that. When we talk about what's normally in Sage 100 Contractor, the legacy report designer, obviously this is created by the original creators of this technology, Omware, when it was called Master Builder, and there's a report designer, and you get a screenshot of that, and so there's various reporting options that I can utilize when I use that report designer. And lots of software out there has a legacy type of report designer. Sage 300, which was Timberline, that has it. This technology has it. Most technologies have something like that. So it's there, and you can learn it, but it's not Excel. And ultimately, when I watch how people use information, ultimately they try to get information into Excel for some purpose, probably because you want to manipulate it and lay it out in the way that it's most useful, or the data you want to present together. It's not easy to do that within certain legacy reporting solutions. And so that's what our mission is to overcome those obstacles. But I could use this report designer, and there's no reason not to if that's what works for you. You could even send this data, the output of this data, into Excel. You could send that data, you could click this button right here, and then the information goes into Excel, and that's not what we're going to be talking about here today. Because that data, when it's pushed into Excel from things like Crystal or a legacy reporting solution, what have you, it's usually static, meaning it's there. Now you do something with it, but anytime you want new information, you have to repeat all these processes. And so there is a cost to doing that. It's time and maybe accuracy. And our objective here is to eliminate those, the time and the accuracy of producing information the way you want. So what we're talking about is that you're going to be looking at the Sage 100 Contractor data from inside of Excel, and you're going to draw that information. You're connecting Excel to the data that you want. And when I show you examples of things that already are available, that's how they were created. So when I show you the designer and some of those aspects, that the ready to use reports would have been created in that way. And there's lots of ways to create these kinds of reports, and maybe a consultant's going to create it in the most optimal way, but that's, some people just want to be able to do it themselves, and you certainly can with this technology. So once that connection has been made from Excel to your source data, then it's just a matter of refreshing that data, and the data is refreshed. There's no more of this pushing and manipulating data. You're really pulling into Excel. So that's what we're talking about. So let's look first at the kind of the finished result. What would it look like? So when you install Liberty Reports into your system, and so if I'm on a remote server, so you may have that. So different people connect to this server. This is my area. I have Excel. I have Sage 100 Contractor, and here I see Liberty Reports. Some people have workstations, and they connect to the data. You can use it in all of these environments. And we'll talk about requirements and things like that more toward the end. But I have a number of reports, these ones that you see here, that come with the software. And so they're templates. There's nothing in these other than instructions. But when I select one and I generate a report, then I'm going to get an output. So let's, if I selected the work in progress report, boom, I have a work in progress report. Now, it will be similar in some ways to what's in Sage 100 Contractor, but obviously it's going to be different because when we were drawn into this market, the Sage 100 Contractor market, we already had a significant population of customers in the Sage 300 market. I'm talking tens of thousands of users, concurrent uses. So obviously, there's a reason why people are using this technology. There must be something it's doing. So it was drawn into the Sage 100 Contractor market. In fact, there was already another Excel-based technology that was there. So why were people using this technology? It's because when I demonstrate how you use it, it's intuitive in how you go about creating something. That's the main, I think, the main purpose. But see, I'll have a result. And I'm going to explain that every one of the templates that come with the software, so you would get all of these, even with a standard license. So we'll talk about licensing in a little bit, but even a standard license, we'll be able to use this. So you'll notice that every single one of these templates will have an information page. So this is your place to start. You know, if you generate this, I'm going to show you how to generate this from, a workbook that has your data in it from the template. But when you do it, if you take a moment to just read this, it tells you, how to use this. What's the scope? What's the recipe? So let's take a step back and pretend that there were no off-the-shelf workbooks already available. So how would we go about creating something either with you or for you or you creating it? And it would start with a recipe. What is it that I want to have? I want to have, information on projects in this case from a variety of different tables. So we'd need the recipe of where the source of that is, and clearly that happened here. And then we would want to know, how did someone want to use this information? So and not be confined by the obstacles of other reporting solutions. So if someone's using this information and they see cost or something else, you would normally say, well, if someone's a stakeholder, they're not a programmer or someone, they're going to say, well, what makes up that number? And in Sage 100 Contractor, you'd run another report, for this, or you'd run another report for this or whatever. But is that really how you want to work? And really, type A personalities like me, I don't want to work that way. I want to get right to the information I need when I have a question. So you'll notice that there's sub-reports. They're already here. And these have data in them because I've refreshed it. But normally there would be no data in these sub-reports. But they're going to get populated when you say, I want to see information on one of these projects. So let's say I want to see this cost information. See here, there's a cost report. So this uses something called drill down. That's a capability of Liberty Reports, that I can take data from here and pass parameters to this report and trigger a refresh. So if you're familiar with Crystal, yep, it's very similar to that, just easier. So if I clicked on this, it passes parameters and I'm seeing what's in my database for this. Now, yeah, I could, if I instead wanted to go into Sage 100 Contractor and run the report, I could come in here and run a report and then run another one and another one. But is that really the best way to work in 2020? And a lot of your peers think, no, not the best way to work. So this is an example, and we can come back to some of these reports, because right now I'm trying to plant the seed of what it is that you're looking at. So in summary, I have a work in progress report. It follows a recipe. You'd want time to look at this and ask questions in your mind and that could be post this presentation of what's the source, how can I change it, how can it be changed, all those questions. And we could address some of those more toward the end, but this is ready to go and it drills into a lot of the information that you want. And it's more information than what you'd see in Sage 100 Contractor, and it's not locked. So that's the other aspect, that the legacy reporting, some of the reports that are mission critical have much of the information you want, but maybe not all. But the problem is they're locked. And there's a reason for that. And I don't want to get into the technical reasons with that technology, but there's a reason why there were limitations to that technology. There are not limitations to this technology. It's just limited to what you want to accomplish and then your plan and what you created. So hopefully I've accomplished that at the high level. I have a couple other things I want to show you, and then I want to show you building something from nothing, and then we can get back to maybe some of the questions and so that you can dig in and understand the technology more. At this point, though, I want to check in and see if there's any questions that I might answer now, and otherwise we'll visit them later.
No questions coming in. Again, feel free to send those in the Q&A box or the chat box.
Okay, great. So now I'm going to come back out to this Launchpad, and I want you to better understand what this Launchpad is. Now, there are tabs on this Launchpad that aren't Sage One or Contractor centric, and that's because the Liberty Reports technology can do a lot more than just Sage One or Contractor. But if you made an investment in Liberty Reports for Sage One or Contractor, these are the templates that come with it. So a standard license is a concurrency use based license, meaning you could refresh something and now you have a report and you could release your concurrency. Someone else can use it. So it's not named user. And you could generate results from these templates. You can have workbooks with your data. And then you could add more content to it, even with a standard license, if you were going to type things into it, right? But you cannot use Liberty Reports to connect to Sage One or Contractor and add more information with a standard license. You would use a designer license. So a designer license allows me to do both, refresh content, but also create my own content. And the standard license is just using the content. And then there is a third way for people to consume the information, and I'll touch upon that. Like if I was going to share data with people who don't have Liberty Reports and they don't have access to my Sage One or Contractor, I could still share the results with someone, and I'll talk about that here in a little bit. But right now, I want to show a different report, and that is a forecast report. And the reason I want to show it is because the forecast report, which is a field-centric report, will resonate with a work-in-progress report. So a work-in-progress report, when we participate in construction financial manager conferences and so on, construction financial management conferences, this is what CFOs and certainly sureties and bonding companies, they're like, what's this? And then when they see this next thing I'm going to show you, they're in love, because now not only do I see what makes up the WIP, and I get a chance to interact and find out my billings in excess and costs in excess, but I can believe the numbers because of what I'm about to show you, okay? And that is because I can get access from the field. Now, at this point, I want to show you that this is one way to get access to your Excel-based content that's powered by Liberty Reports from the Launchpad. Another way is that you just build, you have workbooks that are generated from here, or you build your own and you just put them wherever you want because it's just Excel, right? It's just an Excel workbook. Where do you want to put it? Put it in, launch it from your desktop or whatever. But another way is you can just put these on the report menu here inside of Sage One or Contractor. So you see I have a number of these, and there's this forecast right here. So I could just click this and get the result. And this right here is, in fact, exactly this report. They're the same thing. I just added it right here. In fact, I just drug it and dropped it right there. That's how easy it is with Sage One or Contractor. So I wanted to show you that access to the reports you can control that and have it be kind of part of the Sage One or Contractor experience. So I've generated this workbook, and so let's just go into it real quick. And if I come back to the information page, again, it tells me, how would you use this example and some information about the design and what our approach is. Now, this is pretty sophisticated. A consultant has optimized this to produce the best possible results for you, and I think you're going to like what you see. That doesn't mean that your peers have all approached this the same way. And that's the beauty of Excel-based technology like this, is it can work the way you think, if you wish. And it's also why it's so popular, that when I build something, a lot of times if I know a lot about what I do in a company, I'm not a programmer, I'm not a report writer, I don't necessarily even know the technology all that well, but I know what I want. And oftentimes we have to surrender control to consultants or whatever to produce what we want, but we lack the knowledge that how we got to the numbers you see on a report. So that may be resonating with people who are hearing what I'm saying right now. And you can mitigate that with this technology. And when I show you the designer, I think you'll be very clear about that. So I'm going to set that aside for a moment and just show you the results that I think that you're going to like. So in this, what you're seeing here is for a project, it's what we call a project cost forecast workbook. It is something typically that operations would use. And there is a lot of content on the one that's right out of the, off the launch pad, but you could very well want more and, or have it at a different level. There are actually 2 of these on the launch pad. This one is based on cost type, which you really can't get. Almost no ERP dials in things to the level you're seeing here. This is really a big difference maker here. But there's another one that would just have the rows based on these cost codes, these components here. And so the work process, and a lot of times when you're looking at these kinds of reports, is a work process of I'm gonna generate this for every project I have, and it will only take a minute or 2 for each project, and I'm gonna save it in a folder for called forecasts, and maybe subfolders for project managers. Some people have those people refresh their own workbooks, others the finance group refreshes and distributes and maybe protects so that they can see this data that this is connected to Sage Winter Contractor. This is current as of when I refreshed it. And if I want it to be more current, like right here under Liberty Reports, this lightning bolt right here, that refreshes the data. So I'm guaranteed that all of this data, it reflects what's in my system right now. Now, bear in mind, there are parameters. So if I say as of a certain period, it's going to reflect anything in the system that I may have entered today for that period and before, but it's not going to necessarily reflect through today, this moment, because I've used a parameter to tell it I don't want it through today, this moment. And that's kind of an area between finance and operations where there's some disagreement. Operations sometimes wants information as of this moment, and finance is saying, yeah, well, I have to report as of a certain period of time that's to back up to this WIP. So really it needs to be the end of this month. And anyway, I think everybody probably knows what I'm talking about there. We've done a lot. This is how actually we got into Excel-based reporting. Now, the beauty of this particular one is different people forecast, different companies, different project managers forecast differently. Many people forecast, cost to complete, cost at completion, or percent complete. But in this case, if I self-perform, those items I might want to have be hours to go or units to go, if I have equipment or labor. Well, usually you decide one method to forecast and every row adopts that method. So I say everything's percent complete because I sub most of the stuff out. But in reality, I want to go down here and say, except this row, I want to make this hours to complete. And so we introduced this like a year and a half, 2 years ago, and we've been doing this since the mid-90s, and I was shocked when I saw this, like, oh my God, we need to bring this to the Sage 300 market. So it's pretty cool. So they would go through and they would put in their projections. And if I put in a projection right here, right, so I have, there'll be a certain amount of units over here budgeted, and I have actually hours, and I don't really know what it is, but let's say I know that there are going to be 500 hours to go. Well, now I've got a projection that, and I've got an overage, and maybe I need to do something about it. Now the work process would be I would complete this, and then normally then I would want to follow a process to save this and maybe call it June, and then next month I'm going to refresh that, and the tab would be July, and I would have all my months in a workbook. I'd have visibility of all my forecasts. It's a strategic enhancement to most people that's transformative. And surety companies go nuts. They go, oh my God, that's what I want. These numbers back up your WIP. I'm good. Of course, the CFO or finance person would adjust the WIP for other purposes, but now you've got visibility, and it can also really dramatically impact your cash flow. I would say that also people will put comments over here, and so that this projection has a narrative, and I would want that. We have technology, part of Liberty Reports, that would not be part of Excel. Like producing this in Excel would be hard, otherwise. But that will keep the information you type in on the correct row. That's important because if you added another cost code, like, not that I would, but let's say cost code 500 is added. Well, I've got a problem because 1000 is currently on row 13 and my projections and my comments are on row 13. And the way Excel works is if you refresh the data and cost code 500 now is on row 13, the things you type in will stay on those rows and your report will become useless. And you would do the same thing for like agings, for AR, for determining whether you're going to collect funds. The same challenge is present, and we've mitigated that. It's because we've been doing this for a lot of years, and that's the benefit of having tens of thousands of your peers who've already contributed to how this technology can work. So you've got a project cost forecast, and then that can lead to your work in progress report. And so now there could be lots of questions like, can I customize it, and so on and so forth. Yes. Could you do it yourself? It depends. See, these are pretty sophisticated, but there's no doubt you could create your own work in progress report and your own forecast report using what I'm about to show you. And we can talk to you about how these were created, but bear in mind the consultant who builds these, it has to work for every company using Sage 100 Contractor, and it can't break. So they're going to be a little bit over-engineered to be kind of robust, and consequently not as easy for just the layperson to change. But for most things, it's just a matter of clicking this and hitting insert and then putting what you want right here, either typed it in or a formula. And that will persist so long as there's not a macro that's building this result. So that forecast one I showed you, there's a macro that builds that result and that layout. So that's harder to customize, but you don't have to approach your forecast that way. I would, but it's just up to you. So it will start with a conversation about what it is you want to accomplish, but really out of the box, if you just use this content out of the box and are familiar with this, I would think it would be pretty transformative for you. So that's some of the content. So I want to now show you how the designer works, like what's the power behind this technology. But before I do that, I want to stop for a moment again and ask if there's any questions.
Nope, no questions.
Leona, you've seen other presentations. Do you think I'm getting across the value proposition of the technology and how it relates to what's already in Sage 100 Contractor? I just want to check in with you on that.
No, absolutely, definitely. You're doing a great job.
And it's different than some of my other ones because at this time of the year and in this market, you can imagine that all of your peers are. Now, I will preach to you, having been in this market for 35 years, that everybody should have been doing this all along. But I've heard people go, well, we've always done things this way or that way. And I'm like, well, there's still a better way. And people didn't listen to me, but now they're listening to me. The good thing, and I preach most to the consultants constantly, the chuckle there from Leilani and other folks. But the thing is that, technology arrives and is utilized when it's the right time for a company. It doesn't matter that all this capability is here. It's when you recognize the value proposition. That's when it becomes most transformative. But I will assure you that this technology, as I'm showing you, and its usefulness, there's not another technology with any other competitive ERP that rivals the kinds of things that I'm showing you. And if that's not coming through, then you're not getting what I'm showing, right? We have a disconnect. So let's talk a moment about the designer. And really your peers, once they get up to speed, there are comments that are pretty sensational, like if you can dream it, you can do it with this technology. And that probably is the case. It just is a matter of where the source is of your information and what the plan is to lay it out and use it. So let's talk about some of the tools that are part of Liberty Reports to allow you to create the kind of content that you would see on the Launchpad and what I've already shown you. So if I'm here under Liberty Reports, this is the inside of Excel is where it lives, and this is the working aspect to it. So one part of Liberty Reports is this ability to query information. And another part is the ability to add functions. And Liberty Reports' query is pretty substantial, meaning it can do a lot. And I could spend time showing you all of that, but the fact is that people, when they build something, that we found tend to want to follow an approach that's organic. I grab certain information, I add more and more, and I'm validating that I understand what it is I'm grabbing and presenting. I understand it. And Liberty Reports is very good at helping you with that. So let's just have a look here. So let's say the first thing I wanted to do is just connect to my Sage 100 Contractor and pull some data out. And I will address right now that you could have multiple connections to Sage 100 Contractor and pull from those within a single workbook. So why would that be important? If I've used Sage 100 Contractor for a while, I may have archived information into separate folders like financials, but I might want to pull all of it into one report. And most report writers aren't great at that, but this is very good at that. So I just want to address that we can accommodate that. I just don't want to overcomplicate the presentation by going into the weeds too much. But if I pick the connection here, then it says, or the connection type, then it says, okay, you've made these 4 connections to Sage 100 Contractor. So you have 4 different companies, which in reality are 2 companies, but I made it look like 4 because I want to help you visualize that you could have 4 different companies. I have a name and I have where that is in Sage 100 Contractor. So I'm going to pick one of these. So now it says, okay, you are already using a connection. Do you want to continue to use it? And that's that concurrent use. And I want to say, yes, I do, because then I'm still using my one concurrent use, and any additionals that I have are available for other people. There are rare times when you might want to use more than one concurrency, depending on your role in the company, but it's extremely rare. Most of the time you just use one. And so then it will figure out whether you're using the designer or the standard. And I'm clearly using the designer because I'm using the wizard here. The wizards, the function and query wizard, that's the designer. So now it says, so here's all these tables inside of Sage 100 Contractor. What do you want on your report? And most people will pick a table they want to start with. So let's say I know it's cost related, and I'm kind of coming up up to speed in my mind about what I want. So I'm going to pick this table, and then it's presenting, and it's giving you a visual representation of what's in your table. This would be your data. And then you get to pick the columns. So I say I don't want all these columns. I might pull a whole bunch and then create a pivot table off of that. And some people like that. And pivot tables are great. They're not the fastest way to get summarized presentation of information, but they certainly are things that people pull on. But I'll say I want the job information. I want the cost code. I want the cost type, whatever cost type of the information. I want vendor, because cost table is a repository of my vendor cost, my employee, all the different costs. And then I want the cost, and I want the billing amount. So those are the things I want: job, cost code, cost type, vendor, etc. But notice that the vendor is going to be the number, and it will only have a value if that transaction is vendor associated with it. Same thing with an employee. So this is obviously some other kind of cost that's not vendor or employee related, which is fine. There's lots of ways to put cost in the system, but I want those columns on the report. Now, some people at this point will say, I want to add the vendor name so that the data is more understandable. And that's where you'll find different departures. Like people will say, I want to go ahead and do it here, or I want to just grab this data, confirm it's accurate, and then start adding more columns. And you can do it either way. It's whatever works best. I'm going to do a little bit of both. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and say, I want to see any tables that are related to this table. And most software would not do this, but we've added this capability to make it easier. So now we're looking at all the tables in Sage Wonder Contractor that are related to this table. And I say, oh, I want the job's name. That's out there. So the job table, this table has the name on it. Now, if you don't know what the tables are, your TAG representative does. They can help you understand your database if you don't already know. So I'm going to pick that table and I'm going to say, okay, here's the columns on that table and here's like the values. I want the name, so I'm going to click it. So here we're going to say this is the name for that job. And if there's another job, there'll be a different name. So I've added that. But I don't want it over here. I'm going to click it and visually move it over here. So I can lay things out, you know, the way I want. And I'll grab one other thing. I'll grab vendor. So let's say I'm going to click to this and say, okay, I also want the vendor's name. So here's a list of all the tables related to the cost table, but now I want the vendor's, you know, name, and that's on the vendor table. So I come in here, and now it says, okay, you have actually two tables you're now pulling from. Originally, you only just had one, but now you have two. Which one do you want to use to find the respective vendor that you want to pull data from? And I'll say, well, the cost, because this is a cost-driven report. So this is why some people might not use this if they're not really comfortable with the database. They'll simply pull the original data into Excel, and then they'll use formulas to add their columns. No problem. That's lots and lots of people do it that way. But this is another way. And with a little training, we can help you understand how to use this designer to build some pretty substantial content. So now I'm looking at this table, and here's all these columns of information, but in this case, I just want the vendor's name. Now, what I'm showing, does it appear difficult? I started with one table, then I said, oh, I want content from another table. It's not on this table, so I picked that. And then I said, oh, I've got this other column. I want that content. So now I've picked that and I've added the name and I've moved it over here. Okay, so I'm good to go. And the reason it's blank is that this row is not vendor centric. That's why it's not showing right at the moment. But you can confirm right here that is definitely the vendor's names. So if there is a vendor, you'll see the name. So hopefully that's understandable. And that's as far as I'm going to go with this. I'm going to hit next and just kind of show you a few other things. But notice up here, it shows me the steps, like first pick the table, then pick your columns and maybe columns from other tables. Now I'm going to filter. So what is the filter? Well, think of your transaction table, the cost, all the costs and all your jobs. That's millions of rows for some people. And I may not want all of that. In fact, I probably don't. So what I'm going to say is I do want a condition. I'm going to add a condition that the date out there, because people tend to want these reports to be date sensitive. So the date out there is greater than or equal to, and I'm not going to make it a literal value. I'm going to tie it to Excel. So it's interactive. So I'm going to say the date in Sage, I only want to pull values if the date is greater than the value like right here in A2. So whatever value I have in A2, I want the date, and I'm even going to put a date. I'm going to say 1/1/2018 or 15 or whatever, I guess. Well, I'm not sure. You know your data is going to be 2019, 2020, whatever. I've got sample data. Anyway, so now I've got the columns, and right there I know that I did it right. That's another reason why people love this technology. Some technology, if you start to do this, you don't know if you've done it right until the end. And then you don't know why it didn't work. But here I'm getting confirmation that I did not do something kind of wonky. So I'm going to add another condition that the date is less than or equal to, and here, okay, it's 2018 is the date. So I'm going to say the end of May. So right here, I'm going to say the date is less than or equal to the value here. That's what I'm going to use going forward. And initially, I'm going to plug in 5/31/2018. Because I can see the date right here, right? We preview this. So we try to add all this ease of use to produce some desirable result for you. And once again, it's visually confirming, yep, this is what the results would look like. And then you can say, if you want to summarize it, like let's say I did a report by cost code and vendor, and that's all I wanted. and then I just wanted one row for class code and vendor, then summarization would then play a part. But I'm not going to do that. And you can use Excel to produce your summarizations, like with pivot tables and whatever. But I might want to make sure the data is sorted the way I wanted. So I could say, I want to sort in ascending order of certain things, and it may not be stored in the database the way I want. So the first thing I want to do is by job, and then maybe I want it by date and then by job, but I get a chance to tell it what I want. So job, cost code, and then, you know, like vendor or something like that. Vendor and employee. So, you know, maybe employee. You pick the sort order. And if you don't establish it, it's just however it's sorted in the database. So this gives you a chance. This becomes very important if you're going to sort and subtotal. You want the like data to be grouped, and this is how you group it and the way you want. Some people will not do it here. They'll finish this and then they'll do the sorting and grouping visually out in Excel, and both ways will work just fine. So then the last part is, what's the name of this report? And it's a cost report or a cost summary. The reason this is important is you saw in my other examples that Excel-based solutions will have actually a lot of different reports in them that will facilitate a work process, whereas traditional report writers just do one thing or another or another. So you need to break that in your mind. Don't limit yourself with how technology has worked for the last 35 years. Think about how you want to work with your data and have your reality conform to your business process. And this will allow you to do that. I'm going to say the upper left-hand corner of my report is there, you know, and I'm going to hit finish, and I'll have a result. And so now I can begin to go forward. Like I could say, I can remove the grid lines. That's just Excel. You know, with a report designer, I'd have to teach you how to do things like this. But with Excel, I can just do things the way I want. Or I could put a filter on it. So like the sort and filter, I can just add a filter control, and then I can see, you know, which jobs. And we make that easy for you, right? And when you refresh, all of the things you're doing will persist. And so that's the foundation of what the other stuff is. That's just a lot more thought out about what you want to accomplish. But I told you that you could also add capability. So let's say I added the vendor name, but I didn't add the employee name. So let's say I just hit insert. Some people, this is how they would do it. They would say employee, you know, name, and then they would say, okay, I want to add it. I didn't think about it, you know, but I want to add it here. How do I do that? And I want it to be easy, and it is easy. I just come here and I use a formula. Now, these formulas are like, well, they are Excel formulas, okay? But they're like other Excel formulas, like a VLOOKUP or a sum. It's just that the data, the employee name is not in Excel. It's out in Sage 100 Contractor still. And so I otherwise wouldn't be able to do anything with it. But I don't want to put everything into Excel and duplicate my database. That would be an argument against using Excel. So it says, yeah, I'm not really overwriting the data, but it says, what do you want to do? And I could either find or look up or sum or count. There's lots of different types of functions, but in my case, I want to look up values. And in this case, and I'll move this out of the way so you can see. And this is where, like, if I was pulling data from, like on a financial, from one folder or another, I could change my connection formula by formula right there, but I'm not going to do that.
James, we did have a question about, you know, where this data was coming from and what database it was connected to and all of that. And I think I had clarified it a little bit, but I don't know if you want to mention anything about that for someone who's not currently on Sage 100 Contractor.
Okay, so Sage 100 Contractor has a database, and every software that you buy will have some kind of a database. And Sage 100 Contractor today, the database is Microsoft SQL Server. And that database has tables, and that's what you see here. These are tables. So when I use the menus in Sage 100 Contractor, these tables get populated by using it. So this is where the reports inside of Sage 100 Contractor would pull data from, but they just are only going to do what they were designed to do. There's limitations. So the source is the same as the Sage 100 Contractor reports. It's the Sage 100 Contractor database. And there's tables and then there's columns of tables. So right now I want to see employee name. So there's a table, like this is a cost table. Well, people who develop databases, they don't put every value on every table. The employee name is on the employee table. If you ever need it, that's where it's at. That's where the other reports get it from. So I'm going to show you, it's like, I want that. So how do I find the employee table? If I just came up here and I said employee, I type it in, we'll help you find it. Otherwise, we're showing you the name of the table that has been the name for 20 years, you know, longer. And we're also giving you friendly captions to help it make it be easier. So I'm saying, here's this table, and it says, okay, this is a table of all the employees, and here's some examples of values. What do you want? And I'll, you know, maybe I say first name and last name. I didn't add the ability to add 2 columns here, but I'm just going to, for right now, add the last name. But notice the first name, the column in Sage has a name. In this case, FSTNME. I don't have to use the wizard to add that column. If I know that, I can add this one and say, oh, I want to add another one, and I just reference that field name. In fact, let's just do that because it's easy. So it's FSTNME, right? So I'm just going to add last name, and it says, okay, where you want it for an employee. Where can I find employee? I don't know employee. And you say, well, it's in this preceding column. I'm building a formula, so the employee is going to be in column I, currently row 7, and when I copy the formula down, it will be row 8, 9, 10. So I'm going to say, look in I7 for the employee number, and if there's a value, use it. Yeah, I7, sorry, the little I couldn't see there. And you just build one formula, and then Excel will say, great, I'm going to copy that down to everything else. So that means you can build reports pretty quickly. It may not look it, but anyway, and it's showing you the syntax of what you're creating. You don't have to worry about that though, because the wizard just kind of leads you through it. And so then it says, if I'm adding several fields, is it going to be left to right or top to bottom? It just depends on if you're building a dashboard or a form or whatever. But I'm going to tell it not to include the column caption. I just want it right there, and I've already put in a column caption. So when I say finish, it created the formula and it copied it down. So this is the formula that tells this cell how to get the data I want out of Sage 100 Contractor. Now, did that answer their question about where the data is? It's in Sage 100 Contractor, specifically in the locations that the connections tell you. When you set up a connection, you tell it what Sage folder, and that's where your data is in these folders.
Yeah, I think that was a good amount of information. If you have more questions, feel free to just send those on in if this maybe sparked some other thoughts.
And I don't want to take a deeper dive. I think I would get people lost. Like people get like, okay, you've given me the beginnings. I want to think about it, and then I'll ask more questions. So let's kind of say that's part of the designer. I showed you grabbing dynamic information, because as I change these dates, or as more information goes into Sage 100 Contractor, these reports will refresh. And that's how those other ones work. And then I showed you how I can add additional columns from any of the other tables. But let's say I wanted to say, like, I don't know, I'm going to invent something. So I'm going to say, like, the percent or build or cost of, the percent cost is of billing. So I could say this equals, you know, this column divided by this. Well, is this right here what I'm doing? Is this Liberty Reports? Did Sage create this? Yeah, Sage created this. It doesn't exist in Excel. No, otherwise I was going to say that, but it's not. This is just Excel, right? That's the beauty. All the formulas are just like all the other Excel formulas. That's an Excel formula that you're using on that data. Well, go ahead, do it. You know, use your formula. I'm pretending like I wrote Excel. You really didn't. So you add what you want, and that's an example of doing that. So that's the designer.
So we had a follow-up question, if you have a moment. The question is, any provision for auto estimation of the cost of each activity using the market rates and tagging to the specifications of the contact.
So that would be like a projection is what you're trying to get at? Like looking at the information in the system, trends from that, and maybe information from external sources to accomplish some reporting business objective. Is that what your question pertains to? I think it is.
That's what I'm thinking. I don't see a response, but yes,
okay.
yes.
They said yes. Okay, so, well, number one, I'll tell you, it's Excel. So if you could figure out a way that you might do something like that in Excel, you can leverage that. Now, so let's go back to what Liberty Reports is. Liberty Reports is a tool to connect Excel to your Stage 1 Owner Contractor database. And it does it, and now it's in Excel. And it will, and whatever I do, it will persist. So then the question is, what can I do with that information? So very often, I'll know that someone's not getting it, or they're looking at it kind of what I would say incorrectly. They'll say, like on this forecast report, how are you calculating this or this or this? Okay, so that's an interesting question for you to know how this particular thing works, and that's fine. But if you think that that limits you and your use of the technology, then you would be missing the whole scenario here. When we first created this technology, there were no Launchpad reports. Everything was designed by the person to do exactly what they wanted, and they did a lot. The workbooks I've seen people use have the kinds of things that you just described. So how did they arrive at those kinds of projections? They arrived at it, you know, the way that they would have arrived at it in Excel normally, but they didn't have to worry about leveraging the data in Excel or Sage 1 or Contractor. We provide that connection. So they're guaranteed that the data in Sage 1 or Contractor is laid out and presented in a way that can facilitate this projection process. Now, with that said, have people asked us to do the kinds of things? I mean, maybe not exactly what you're saying, but the kinds of things. And yes, absolutely. When people say, look, I want to accomplish X, Y, Z, and some of the data is in Sage 1 or Contractor and others is from this website. Like I've implemented this kind of technology internationally for companies as large as Fleur Daniel and Bechtel. So I've had to do with currency conversion and revaluation and VAT calculations and projections and financial forecasting and all that kind of stuff. Those people generally know kind of how they want it to be or how maybe other people have laid it out, but then maybe they want to tweak it. So we can facilitate that, but we would do that in a project for someone. And the projects, it depends on the level you engage a project. But at the Sage professional services level, we would have a scope of work where we're defining what you want in the source and how things work. And that has a cost, but it's, you know, it's less than designing a report, but it's then the recipe for what it is that you want to accomplish. Now, some people say, thanks very much, I will do the majority. I maybe want you to do this and this, but I'll do the rest. Thanks though for that recipe. Or you say, execute, you know, make that thing happen. And we have done that for people. We are limited to what we can show, because if you engaged us to build something like that, that typically is your secret sauce, like your mission critical. You don't want to go through a process to build something and then have that given to everyone. And so we, of course, wouldn't. But if at Sage's direction, there could be additional content added to the Launchpad that are what Sage considers mission critical kind of reports that a large population of customers might benefit from. And then that content would then be built utilizing this technology. So I guess those are a lot of words. You can accomplish the things you want. I've certainly seen people do that, but a lot of people have just done it themselves once they learn how the tool works, and maybe they draw us in for certain of the more difficult things on staging the Sage 1 or Contractor data optimally for them to utilize the other things that they want to do, that they're probably already doing. But because I love that question, because there's another approach to reporting. So there's a lot of business intelligence reporting out there, and things that people have created that already have the kind of information you're talking about sliced and diced, and you just use it. But bear in mind, you have to use your software the way that technology wants you to use your software, and you are greatly limited as to what you can do with the end result. So there's a give and take no matter what approach you use. Hopefully that answers the question.
One more question in regards to SAP. Can I export the data from Excel to SAP?
Well, any data that's been in Sage 1 or Contractor, see right here, it's in Excel. When it's in Excel, it's in Excel. Do with it as you please. So getting into SAP has all sorts of ways to take comma-separated value files that are in the correct format and to populate into SAP. It can't, the delivery reports for Sage 1 or Contractor cannot read SAP data, but that doesn't mean that we don't have other technology that's designed for that playing field. It's not Sage 100 Contractor centric, but we can tag and as we can interact to get you information on other technologies that might be used to mine SAP or other sources. And it might work very similar to what I've described, but SAP's database quite a bit different, than what we're looking at here.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a really good point. I'm glad they brought that up. One of the biggest opportunities that people do not ask about, and everybody should. Now, I get it with legacy reporting, forget it. But with this, you should be asking this question. You could say, so these columns are coming from Sage 100 Contractor. Can I have this contract information in here somewhere come from Procore or from Project Site, or, which is a Trimble product, or from wherever, I don't know, some other system? And the answer is probably. It's either yes or probably. Like there's other technology that we might be able to bring to the table. And so what would happen is you'd interact with your TAG representative and us together, when we would evaluate what it is that your needs are, and then we can recommend the kinds of technologies that will most affordably get you to what you want to accomplish and have it work as seamlessly as possible.
Yeah, I'd say definitely. Good job.
I got to remember to record that. Sorry, I'm not patting myself on the back. I do these a lot, and I think, oh, I've said that. I like that. I have to encapsulate that. So thank you.
Yeah, no, it was good. Yeah, definitely. And the attendee said thank you. So definitely send us an email if you'd like to dive into this a little bit deeper.
Yes. So good starting point, and I think it's understandable, right? The technology is understandable. Let's just to show you, there's a few more slides that we're going to follow up. So we'll follow up after the presentation. I'm meaning TAG, our team. And so there's other content I didn't touch upon, like if people wanted to do financials, what would you do? There is a financial that's on there, but if you wanted to build your own, we have some content. So there's a knowledge base out there that will direct you as to how to work with the Sage 100 Contractor database to achieve certain objectives, in this case, financial reporting. So there's that content. The value proposition, really, hopefully everybody, we're in connection, right? Things are resonating with people. So this is the value proposition, is to, there's an investment, and it's a combination of the license types to accomplish some objectives that would otherwise take you a lot more time to accomplish, because there's nothing really that we do that you couldn't manually type in, but then is it accurate? And who would want to spend the time? These are the different licenses, a concurrency-based. Standard license allows you to refresh. Designer allows you to design. I mentioned to everyone there was another way to do stuff, and I just want to show that. I'm not going to do everything, but let's say I'm in a report like this report, and or a financial, and I want to give this to somebody that does not have Liberty reports. If I've saved this workbook, there's an option here that says save as values. And that means it will create an Excel workbook. It'll have macros and all that, but it will detach Liberty reports so that it's static data. So you'll get, and you could do both in a macro. You could say refresh and then save as values. An Excel macro could do both. So that's the third level of consumption of information, and that, that's free, but it's also not interactive. So this is how we think your process forward is, and letting us create a proposal for you. And so I talked about the professional services. I mentioned that earlier. And then training classes. That's, people say, that's normally a question. So we have slides, and they're curriculum based. They're designed to lead you through a process so that the technology I demonstrated is understandable. And these are really focused on making you successful as a designer. I don't think you need a lot of help to come up to speed with the standard licensing. And there, now I'm transitioning back to you.
Perfect. So that is great. Again, if you'd like to dive deeper, or if there are some other aspects of this tool that might be of interest to you, James has a lot of content that we can share. We can also set up a follow-up meeting to dive deeper. You can ask all your questions, and we can do a more tailored demonstration. So thank you, James, again, for another great presentation. To all the attendees, we will send a recording as well so that you have that information, you have the recording to share with the rest of your team members. Thank you again. Thanks, James. Thanks, attendees. We will see you next week.
You're welcome. Take care, everyone.